"Ma'am, step off the asphalt," I said, my voice steady but low. She laughed, that sharp, mocking kind of laugh people use when they think they've already won. "Your asphalt. Don't be ridiculous. This is HOA property." The cops hesitated between us, eyes darting, unsure who to believe. And then I said the line that changed everything. "I'm not under your HOA." When the officer read the deed in his hand, when he realized the road she was standing on was actually mine, her face turned white as chalk. That's how the Queen of Lakewood Trails lost her crown, right there on my pavement. "My name's Jake Miller, 42 years old, retired civil engineer, former county land surveyor, and apparently the neighborhood's #1 problem. I moved here thinking I'd finally left all that zoning nonsense behind the maps, the property disputes, the people who thought a clipboard made them God. The house I inherited from my uncle sat at the end of a cul-de-sac, right where the lake caught the sunset. It was old creaky with a cedar fence and a navy blue mailbox. Not the kind of place that blended into their beige cookie-cutter world, and that's exactly why they hated it. At first it was peaceful. Mornings smelled like fresh-cut grass and coffee. Kids rode bikes down the street. Neighbors waved cautious, polite, the way small-town people are when they're not sure if they should trust you yet. Then one Tuesday morning, a letter slid under my door. White envelope, gold seal. Lakewood Trails Homeowners Association. Inside in big red letters. Violation, non-compliant mailbox color. I laughed. I actually laughed out loud. Must have been a clerical error. So I called the number. "Lakewood Trails office." "This is Marcia," said the chirpy voice on the other end. "Hi, I think there's been a mistake," I said. "My property isn't under your HOA, the county records." "Oh, don't worry, Mr. Miller," she interrupted sweetly. "We'll sort that out. After you pay your balance." "My balance?" "Yes, you're behind on dues for the fiscal year, but once you send the check, we can update your records." I could hear her smiling through the phone, that patronizing, perfumed kind of smile that smells like entitlement. "Ma'am," I said slowly, "I don't owe your association anything. My deed predates your charter." There was a pause. Then, in that sugary voice again, "Well, we'll see what the board says about that." Click. That was my first introduction to Marcia Langley, president of the Lakewood Trails HOA Queen of Manicured Lawns and self-proclaimed guardian of community standards. Within days I started getting newsletters, glossy pages full of friendly reminders. All mailboxes must be neutral beige. Decorative fences shall not exceed 4 feet. Property harmony is everyone's responsibility. They sounded harmless, but I knew what that tone meant. I'd written those kinds of memos myself, control hidden behind politeness. Then came Greg Marcia's brother-in-law, retired cop, turned compliance officer. He started parking his white SUV across from my house every morning, pretending to check his phone while snapping photos through the window. On the 4th day, I walked up to him. "Can I help you with something?" I asked. He smirked. "Just doing my job, sir. Community inspection." "This isn't your community," I said. He chuckled. "That's not what Marcia says." I stared at his mirrored sunglasses and saw my reflection, calm, jaw tight. Then Marcia's wrong. That night I installed trail cams and a private property no photography sign on the fence. The next morning the sign was gone. Later I checked the footage. Greg, broad daylight, ripped it clean off. I labeled the clip Harassment 1.mp4 and started a folder on my desktop, Lakewood Trails case file. The letters kept coming. Final notice, pending lien action. Each one more threatening than the last. I hand-delivered the next one straight to Marcia's door. She opened it with that politician smile, gloves on pearls shining. "Mr. Miller." "What a surprise." "You can stop sending these," I said, handing her the envelope. "Oh, that's just procedure," she cooed. "Once your balance clears, we'll remove the lien warning. There is no balance, and you have no jurisdiction here." Her smile faltered. "We maintain this street, Mr. Miller. That gives us authority." "Maintenance doesn't equal ownership," I said. Even my interns knew that. She blinked furious but trying to hold her tone. You'll regret being difficult. Nobody likes a non-compliant neighbor. I'm not your neighbor, I said quietly. I'm your boundary. That night they put up a new sign at the entrance of the street. Private road, HOA members only. They bolted it right into the asphalt. My asphalt. I stood there in the twilight watching the paint dry, realizing this wasn't about rules. It was about power, about control. So I did what I knew best. I documented everything. Every letter, every photo, every whisper. But as the days went on, the isolation crept in. Neighbors who once waved now turned their backs. Kids stopped cutting through my yard. A woman who used to bring me cookies crossed the street instead. And I started to doubt myself. Maybe I was the problem. Maybe I'd made a mistake moving here. Some nights I sat awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if this fight was worth it. Then one night I went through my uncle's old files, maps, plats, and letters yellowed with age. At the bottom of the drawer I found a hand-drawn survey from 1978. My uncle's handwriting was clear. Private right-of-way Miller property. The so-called private HOA road had never belonged to them. It was part of our parcel all along. The next morning I drove to the county records office. Mrs. Henson, the old clerk, squinted at her monitor and chuckled. Well, would you look at that right-of-way still in your family's name? The HOA's been using it rent-free for years. I grinned. Thank you, ma'am. You just made my week. That night I laid out the maps and papers across my table like evidence in a courtroom. I traced the lines again and again until I saw it clearly. The HOA's empire was built on a road they didn't own. 3 weeks later at a county auction, I bought that road under a newly formed LLC, JM Civil Holdings. $7,800. That's all it took to buy the same asphalt Marcia had ruled over like it was her kingdom. A week later the deed arrived, stamped and sealed. I planted 3 small survey markers, one at each end of the street, one at the entrance. Reflective tape, silver tags, engraved words, private easement access by permission only. Legal, precise, quiet. The next morning Marcia stood by one of them, phone in hand, snapping photos. She didn't wave. Neither did I. By noon, a letter appeared on my porch. Notice of pending legal action, unauthorized alteration of association property. Signed, Marcia Langley, President. I laughed so hard I spilled my coffee. They'd just accused me of vandalizing my own road. A day later, Greg emailed the entire neighborhood. Emergency HOA meeting topic, non-member trespass and street violations. Perfect. They were about to hold a public meeting to accuse me of crimes on land I legally owned. I sent one anonymous email to the local newspaper. This Saturday, Lakewood Trails HOA will hold a meeting to discuss property rights over a road they don't own. Might make a good story. An hour later, the reply came. On it. Sarah K. County Chronicle. Saturday morning. Folding chairs lined the cul-de-sac. Neighbors gathered, clutching their coffee cups, eyes full of curiosity and tension. Greg stood like a bodyguard in khakis. Marcia, in her perfect cardigan, held the mic like a weapon. We are here to address a serious threat to our community, she began, her voice amplified over the street she didn't own. A certain individual has tampered with association property and refuses to comply with our regulations. I stayed back, hands in pockets, letting her build her little stage. Then she turned to me. Mr. Miller, would you like to explain why you think you're exempt from the rules? I stepped forward slowly. I'm not exempt, Marcia. I'm just not under your HOA. Gasps. Murmurs. Greg's sunglasses reflected the crowd like a mirror. Marcia smirked. Then you admit it. You're a non-compliant resident. Officer, she called, motioning toward the 2 patrol cars waiting nearby. This man is trespassing on HOA property. The sirens lit up, red and blue flashing against the beige houses. The same deputy from before stepped out. What seems to be the issue here? Marcia pounced. He's installing signs on our private road. We need him removed immediately. I stayed calm. Ma'am, I said you might want to step off the asphalt. She scoffed. Your asphalt? Don't be ridiculous. I reached into my folder and handed the deputy a single sheet of paper stamped signed fresh from the county courthouse. "Before you do that," I said quietly, "maybe you should check who actually owns this street." He read it once, then again. His brow furrowed. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "this property belongs to J.M. Civil Holdings." She blinked. "What?" He turned the paper for her to see. "That's this man's company. You're standing on private property that doesn't belong to the HOA. You could have heard a pin drop." Greg froze. The neighbors whispered. Someone pulled out their phone and started recording. Then the reporter Sarah Kent stepped forward, notebook in hand. "Deputy, can you confirm that for the record?" He nodded. "Confirmed." "HOA has no jurisdiction here," Marcia stammered. "That's impossible. We've maintained this road for 20 years. "Maintenance isn't ownership," the deputy replied. Her eyes darted around, looking for someone to save her. Alan Pierce, the HOA treasurer, stepped out of his black sedan, trying to sound confident. "Even if the deed says otherwise, maintenance grants authority." I smiled. "Authority? Maybe. Ownership? No. And you'd know that if you'd ever read Statute 45-111 jurisdictional easements. It clearly states that maintenance does not confer property control or tax exemption unless deeded." Alan's face drained. Sarah Kent's pen scratched furiously across her notebook. "So she said loudly for the cameras the HOA has been collecting dues for a road they don't legally own." "That's correct," I said. "They've charged residents for maintenance and security on property that wasn't theirs. That's called misrepresentation." The crowd turned. Voices rose. "So where'd all our dues go?" "Marcia," someone shouted. "Yeah, what happened to the road fund?" another added. Marcia tried to speak, but her mic was dead. The deputy leaned toward her. "Ma'am, given the evidence presented, the board is advised to suspend all HOA activity until a county review is complete." The silence cracked into scattered applause, small at first, then growing. Greg ripped down the HOA banner, his hands shaking. The wind dragged it across the asphalt, the words, "Protecting our streets," smearing into the gutter. Marcia backed away, trembling. "You can't do this," she hissed. I looked her straight in the eye. "You built walls and called them community, but the truth doesn't belong to you." By sunset, the cruisers were gone. The neighbors drifted home in stunned silence. I stayed there in the middle of my street, my road as the orange light bled across the asphalt. The same road they once used to threaten me was finally mine in every sense that mattered. When the county audit came out a week later, it confirmed everything: $62,000 in HOA dues lost to administrative discrepancies. Marcia was fined for falsifying boundary statements. Alan was charged with fraud. Greg lost his private security license. And the headline on the County Chronicle read, "Homeowner exposes HOA fraud, buys their road." I didn't celebrate, didn't gloat. I just stood by the new sign I'd put up at the cul-de-sac, a small metal plate gleaming in the sun. "Private property, access by permission only." People think power comes from titles, from rules, from signatures and seals. But real power, the kind that lasts, comes from knowing exactly where you stand and refusing to move when someone else tries to redraw the map.